Absolutely, please do.
All right, it's connecting the live stream right
One
now.
of these.
Rather slowly, but it's connecting.
So I think I will just wait a minute for Mary Jo to get back.
Okay.
Sorry, I heard my name. Sorry.
All right, it's live now.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. I'm Ethel Racken from Bucks County Community College. Welcome to the Bucks County 44th Poet Laureate Reading and Celebration. Thank you all for being with us today. Thank you to Chris Bursk, the Department of Language and Literature, especially Dean Nicole Tracy, to Jean Dolan, the Cultural Affairs Committee, Damon Honeycutt, and to all of you who participated in this year's contest. The Bucks County Poet Laureate Contest, the oldest such program in the Commonwealth, was started in 1977 by the Bucks County Council on the Arts and was moved to Bucks County Community College under the directorship of Professor Stan Heim in 1986. Dr. Christopher Bursk directed the program for many years, and I am so honored to have taken up the mantle. The Laureate program sponsors two contests, the Poet Laureate contest in the fall, which we're celebrating today, and the High School Poet of the Year contest in the spring. Information about our spring contest will begin circulating at the beginning of January, and the deadline for submissions will be in early March. This year, the Poet Laureate contest received over 75 entries from across the county, making decisions difficult for our two wonderful judges, Liz Chang, who's with us here today, and Brady Chambers, who will be joining us for a reading this spring in March, so stay tuned for that. There were so many entries worthy of praise and award, and we ask that you consider participating again next year. Today we'll have the pleasure of hearing the work of Judge Liz Chang, three runners-up, Jenny Isacs, Moren Connelly, and Melinda Rizzo, the 43rd Poet Laureate, Mary Jo Lobello Jerome, and the new 44th Poet Laureate, Jane Edna Mohler. So sit back, relax, grab another cup of coffee, tea, or what have you, and enjoy today's reading. We'll be starting with Liz Chang. Liz Chang was 2012 Montgomery County Poet Laureate. Her chapbook, Animal Nocturne, is available from Moonstone Press. Liz's poems have recently appeared in Verse Daily, Origins Journal, Breakwater Review, and Stoneboat Literary Journal, among others. Her translations of French Surrealist poet Claude de Bourrine were published by the Adirondack Review. She's an associate professor of English at Delaware County Community College. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you so much, Ethel, and thank you everyone for having me this afternoon. I am so thrilled to be representing Montgomery and maybe Chester County here with the Bucks County Poet Laureate Program. So, and I just wanted to echo everything that Dr. Racken just said about the entries this year. They were truly wonderful, and it was a pleasure to read everyone's work. Today, I would like to start off with a poem. I was kind of thinking of starting with the poem that was on the poster, but then I woke up this morning and picked a totally different one, kind of out of the air, but it seemed like in keeping with the times, let's say that. And as I begin to read this poem, I'm just going to share my screen because this poem is called Flamingos in the Men's Room, and it's from my chapbook, Animal Nocturne. So let me just see if I can share my screen really quickly. All right, so you should see in front of you a picture of a bunch of flamingos in the men's room and at the Miami Zoo. And the purpose of kind of showing you that this is a real picture is just to, you know, that to me, the poem happened after I saw this picture, but it kind of goes in a different direction. This whole idea of kind of the things that we do in these strange times. So it's called Flamingos in the Men's Room. Like bright pink deck chairs laid against a wall, they crush toward the interior, an arc of salmon around that one ancient hand dryer. They do not jostle for position, but wait. These animals who, if you ask me, have always moved a bit dumbly, like teenagers whom you've asked a small favor, maybe restocking the toilet paper after its last leaf has fallen or been shaken to the ground. They stare back with empty expressions, and if you listen closely, you can hear the contempt splashing down into the basin of their eyes as they move even more slowly. Now, though, in this moment of hurricane evacuation played out, these birds are calm as a deck of cards. Nothing cleaves folks like disaster, a quick shuffle and sort of who in life will burst and who will flutter, settle, still. Okay, so that's, you only needed the picture for that one poem. So I'll go back to the larger screen here. And many of the poems in my chapbook, as Dr. Racken mentioned, are kind of inspired by animals, which is the thing that I only realized kind of after I assembled them into a chapbook. But to be frank, probably what was in the back of my brain while I was writing the poems was Dr. Temple Grandin's book, Animals in Translation, which is a wonderful book if you ever get the chance to read it. The subtitle is Using the Mysteries of Autism to Unlock Animal Behavior. So it's a great book. And one of the kind of things that stuck with me was this idea, again, of how animal behavior is really kind of reflected, or we think, in human behavior. And so this poem is called A Herd of Elephants is Sometimes Called a Memory. For A, who once alleged I remember too much of him. If our knowing of each other were an earthly thing, it would be dappled elephant hide, ancient pachyderm skin, stretched taut across mud-cured footpads to receive tiny seismic seizures like tender pen taps, calls to rejoin the herd so low they rumble unheard past any human. I know that your marriage is dying. I wish to have language strong enough to carve away the sorrow, to mourn together and so low that only we can hear it. So the piece that comes from Dr. Grandin's book is that apparently elephants can communicate at the register that's too low for humans to hear, but the theory is that they kind of do it through their feet. They receive the very, very low rumbles over like 25 miles through their feet, which is such a cool concept, I thought. So that's where the poem kind of comes from. And the next one that I was going to read is the one that I had the good fortune of having reprinted in Verse Daily, and it was in honor of Walt Whitman's 200th birthday. I kind of always think that I cheated a little bit here because I didn't write an original poem. I just took his and reconstructed it. But one of the things that I do pretty often in my work, as you'll see, is I kind of write one of two extremes, I guess. One style of poem is mostly elegies and fairly personal usually. And the other style is kind of more conceptual. So I would say that this is kind of more in the conceptual camp where I'm taking somebody's work and kind of repurposing it for my own purposes. So it's called They're Launching a Poemless Library to the Moon. And it's a reconstructed version of Whitman's As I Ebbed with the Ocean of Life. And it begins with an epigraph, which is a private space exploration company is working to send a microfiche library to the moon in 2020. This was in a news story in 2018. It will include Wikipedia and the Rosetta Project. As I wend to the shore I know not, where the fierce old mother endlessly cries for her castaways, I list to the dirge, the voice of men and women wrecked, amid all the blab whose echoes recoil upon me, aware now that the sentiment stands for all the water and all the lands of the globe. As I ebbed with the ocean of life, pointing to silence in these songs, oppressed with myself that I have dared to open my mouth, that before all my arrogant poems, the real me stands yet untouched, untold, altogether unreached, me and mine, little corpses, you up there walking or sitting, whoever you are. And as I kind of previewed a minute ago, I said that the poems that are not conceptual are sometimes more based in kind of elegiac, I guess. And so I have a couple of those that I was going to read next. So this one is called At the Funeral. Her infant daughter stares, gathering up the scene in her mind as a late season bee collects pollen, reflexively carrying and storing. She does not know to yowl for her dead. I want an animal nocturne, a howling choir of loss to mourn my friend, but this mute choreography exposes the depth of her disappearance. The stoic silence of this day will be transposed for her child later, much later, when she cannot remember her mother. I carry my daughter inside me. I try not to cry for her, but my body disobeys me. I weep through my ribs in the walled garden in the winter, crushing umber flora underfoot for my friend who was named for the snow. And sorry to kind of stay in this world for a second, but I have a few that I wanted to kind of read in succession that are for a friend of mine who passed away just about a year ago. And like I said, kind of variations on a theme. So this poem is called How I Will Try to Explain Your Death to My Daughters, for Matthew. I will tell them that like raindrops crashing into glass, we are sliding slowly, jerkily downward. We are pulled this way and that by love like magnets. I will remind them that on that last night of celebration, you danced a circle around me, chased my 4-year-old in 8 counts, and I and the baby were your meridian. I will tell them when you are saturated with love, you will leap, miraculous and defiant as Baryshnikov, to become clear and curious water, to return to the humble earth. And this one is called Grieving, Explained to My Daughters. You may be a Bartlett, overripe in unexpected places, and the world turns your skin to sponge under its gentle pressure, always finding parts of you kept hidden, pretended were sturdy, but were not. Sometimes the sorrow cracks all the way to your core, and a morsel of former self, who you were with the person you lost, falls away. After a while, the outside world will bruise you less and less often, and in the end, that will hurt too, because it will feel like forgetting. But try to be like the pear, green and round and new. And this one is the last of that kind of mini series. It's a little bit of a different tone, I'll say. So it's a kind of tongue in cheek because it's called Why I Am Angry at My Favorite Folk Singer. She's coming to the park near your house in July, and in January, days after your diagnosis, you marked you were interested. I had no idea you loved her or even liked her, and I wanted to ask you about it, to hold up my love next to yours, watch the light pass through it, quote song lyrics until our mouths ran dry or the beer ran out. But a friend who lost her husband to the same cancer cautioned me, try not to bring the world of the living into the world of the dying. So I held my love away from you. They gave you 2 months in March, and when it came, it was almost to the day. Now it is not yet early June, and the bees have begun filling their hive with sweet, hard work, and I hate her for offering you what you can no longer have. So I said those were kind of parts of a mini series. The next, there are kind of 4 short pieces that are really more kind of tied together thematically. They actually harken back to that poem, the At the Funeral poem. But one of the things that you'll hear with this one is it is a little bit more of that kind of conceptual end of things, which is so funny. I think that's, I came from visual arts before I ended up in kind of the writing world. And I think I kind of did the same thing when I was a visual artist too, that I had very personal work and then also conceptual work. So this kind of falls in that camp. And you'll hear that there are little pauses in this in these pieces. And I like to say that they're a little bit like what you would think of with music, kind of the rests that are happening. But as well, unfortunately, this was a friend who I was very close to when I was little, and then we lost track of each other in kind of the middle of our lives. And we reconnected just months before she was tragically killed in a bike accident, as in a pedal bike. She was riding her bike and she was hit by a truck. So there are things that I will just kind of never know, big holes in kind of our relationship. So you'll hear me kind of read those pauses. And this series is called Fragments Pulled from the Fire. This first one is called The Light That Runs Through Things. My dead uncle's fingers contained the universe when I was 5. Holding up each kaleidoscope, he irradiated fluidity of nature. Now I rejoice in my daughter's first tooth, a misshapen pearl in the closed mirror of her mouth, then the soft thunk of the universe turning. You will never see your child's furnished grin. 2. Waking up, I don't remember someone I love has died. Running outside after rain, the water saturated the blacks and blues and everything sharper. But me and my socks to retrieve something for my daughter. How I scoured newspaper reports until I was certain you died wearing a bicycle helmet. Moisture leached between my toes and closed-eyed petals stuck like burls on the pads of my feet, the smell something at once, woody and rotten. How you were playful and reckless. And this is 3. The life and death behind things. You were our Icarus, rising to Carnegie Hall at 10, son of man whose hubris drove you into the wind, banished from your life, the sun contracting, the sun. I don't write happy poems, only elegies, but you were finally happy, pictured a daughter in the final quiver, landing targets for 31 years, resplendent with honeyed light, so full of gravity. And I wonder if this contained death marks you first, we who lived through other fires, the sudden melting, the portrait your mother chose for your pyre when you were 7 and ours. So this is the 4th one of that series, and it's called At Least There Is This. And again, I try and at least end on a little bit of a lighter note. Your daughter was born with coffee-colored irises, opacifying pigments fully bloomed. This small part of her finished growing and held you. All right, so I'm kind of stepping back from that series for these last few poems. And so this one is called, it's an older one. But again, for some reason, I've been thinking a lot about the ocean recently. I think it's because I'm stuck in my house away from the ocean and I'm so desperate to get back to the shore. But this one is called Postcard to His Wife. How long he kept your name for himself. The sea reaches for the smooth breast of the shore and turns away. Now the ocean comes back to me in all my poems. Here the wind whirls your name into crescendo, where we lay awake in sandy arsenals. He talked about moving inland. I must have laughed. Now the pipers pick over the man of war, washed of his armor and shuddering plum dye, all that is left of this cup of new Narcissus, who was a fool to have settled for the pond, when he could have run into the sea, embracing hundreds of mollusk admirers who might die and rot and still call after him. They pine for their first love down to chiseled bone. I wish I'd been a monument when I heard him say, I've met someone. Instead, I read and reread the indictment of the tide, slapping the stage shore, wishing to grow gills and drown kissing air. Then you could cut along my ribs and pry me open, find flecks of mercury winking to know that he had flown. I often tell my students about that one because they will ask me, you know, how long does it take to write a poem? And I say that I worked on that poem for probably 6 years. I mean, off and on, right? And then one day I was walking along the shore in Key West and I looked down at my feet and saw a Portuguese man of war. And I was like, that's the image that my poem is missing. And I totally went and reconstructed it. And I don't know, honestly, I couldn't even tell you what's so different about the new version versus the old versions, but it arrived. After 6 years, it arrived. So anyway, I think I will just read 2 more. And sorry, give me 1 second. I will read this one. That is a short one. And again, my hope is that it hopefully brings the mood up a little bit more because it's maybe my attempt to be funny. So it's called Love as a Chicken. I did kind of a short series of love poems for my husband. So this is Love as a Chicken. Sometimes I envy couples who are mistaken for siblings, but I've found now, love, that if their love is the backyard hen, then ours is the extraordinary mille fleur Belgian barbou, her rust-colored body adorned with the confused faces of epoxied African violets. Our love defies the evolutionary improbability with crested ludicrousness. Although she may startle those expecting the ordinary chicken, once she struts a few steps, they relent, acknowledging her innate pulchritude. After some quick staccato bobs of her head, they forget they saw anything at all peculiar, and she can and does return to her scratch work. And I think I will just end on this poem, which is a lot of kind of the feel of the poems that I've been writing more recently, although this itself is an older poem. So a lot of what Animal Nocturne kind of focuses on is this idea of becoming a mother as a multiracial Asian woman. And especially in the last year or so, that has taken on a whole new significance, of course. But a lot of my work, and I mentioned visual art and writing, always ties into this idea of identity. And so when I knew I was pregnant with my older daughter, I started thinking about what are the things that I want to tell her? What are the things that I can pass along? And that's where this poem came from. So it's called Baby's First Colors, and it begins with an epigraph from a woman who's not related to me, but her name is Sharon Chang. And she was telling the story of talking to her 4-year-old multiracial son. And he said, "Mom, am I white?" When I told him no, he immediately followed up with, "Am I black?" When I told him he wasn't, he started crying and told me, "But I want a color too." Baby's first colors. Baby, what you are is every color. The best parts of your yellow-white mama, and her white is really blue and red and green and red and white and red and just red, but we can all agree that that makes white, and your orange-green plaid daddy. When others ask you what color you are, you may say plaid, orange, green, yellow, white, red, 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 blue, green, white. Or you can just say that you are the star of the plumeria as it yawns open to white, the arcing red ochre green of the stem. You are also the rust of the lichen on sandstone grave markers, the shade of many feet walking across the fecund earth. If your audience still isn't placated, as some will never be, you can say, "At night I am the red moon and sky for deserving sailors. By morning I am usually new." In February, I am moon pies. Sometimes I am the rare blue moon. Sometimes I am strange, even to myself. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. I look forward to hearing everybody else read.
Wow. Thank you so much, Liz. That was such a beautiful reading. Thank you. So next up are our three runners up, and we'll start with Jenny Isacs. Jenny is a graduate of the writing seminars at Johns Hopkins University, where she studied with David St. John and Daniel Mark Epstein. Her poems have appeared in Painted Bride Quarterly, the Lehigh Valley Writers Review, US One Worksheets, the Mad Poets Review, and Thatchworks, an anthology published by the Delaware Valley Poets. An educator, green, Quaker, and organizer, she is the director of Immigrant Rights Action, Grupo de Acción of Doylestown. This is what Judge Grady Chambers had to say about Jenny's work. I really admired how well made these poems were. From the first poem to the last, the writer shows real skill with language, sound, and lineation, and sometimes uses form, the sonnet in lacuna, and something close to a sonnet in lampyridae, fireflies, that puts the writer's formal abilities on display. A number of the poems show an interest in memory and are full of insight earned by age. They ask whether the past is something we come from or something we invent in hindsight. The speaker thinks back to their younger selves, quote, electric 18, brittle 22, realizing, quote, they did not engender me, I invent them. The poems were strongest to me when they evoked specific scenes. That's when vivid, sometimes startling details, full of lived life, really emerged. And, quote, outstretched hand holding tiny scissors, or the speaker remembering how they once, quote, ate baby artichokes, drank wine at Santa Anita, trying on an unlikely life. Welcome, Jenny. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So I have two poems to read. The first one is called, was written for a friend whose ex-wife committed suicide. And it's called Whole. In the end, you'd come to this unpracticed passage. Cats, ashes, impermanence, new sense of what can be, awoken to repeatedly. Once you viewed memory as medium, like print or ink. It is a self-intersecting manifold of continuous causal curves. The math for this can map, but not explain. It's organized like a new tattoo, more than a wound, away. The second poem has a little bit of footnoting. The title is The Asymmetric Property of Time. And in the poem, a German word, Umkehrenwand, is used specifically to refer to that. It is known as the reversibility or also the irreversibility paradox, which is the objection that it should not be possible to deduce an irreversible process from time symmetric dynamics, which basically cuts to an argument in physics that is deconstructed somewhat in the poem. It begins with an epigraph from John Eddington's The Nature of the Physical World. And that is, let us draw an arrow arbitrarily. If, as we follow the arrow, we find more and more of the random element in the state of the world, then the arrow is pointing towards the future. If the random element decreases, the arrow points towards the past. That is the only distinction known to physics. John Eddington, The Nature of the Physical World. On the morning of your 50th birthday, I was hanging in the sky behind the sun, watching a band of light widen ahead of me, dawn a stacked ribbon of colors at a visible angle to the perfect Cartesian x-axis of the vast Atlantic, narrowing to indigo behind me, full flood of light imaginable ahead, a sloping pink and orange sunrise, glimpse of time, I thought, an orientation from 33,000 feet, so easy to see how west of me is also slightly in the past. It's yesterday where you are, night coming on you alone, in your time zone, so far behind and below, so close to sea level. Yes, we live on a round planet, but of course, time is not the mechanical roll of spinning round ball around glowing round ball, which if reversed would make perfect sense. No, time's anisotropic. That pesky second law of thermodynamics obtains again. But physicists love talking paradox. So umkehreinwand means at the microscopic level, time symmetrical. The unsolved question is why we can't see both ways, whether causality's a quirk of consciousness, whether when I wake to a stray memory of our bodies configured on the same coordinate plane, or when I work to make a gift out of recurrence, out of the turning and return, I am causing the past, that early rising to duct tape a poem to your door, that across the floor pounce. Every year, the urgency of our so young selves, increased by energy put into the system later, delta Q, rising heat. A physicist could play with that notion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Congratulations again. It's beautiful. Next up is Moren Connelly. Moren is a former owner of a consulting firm that helps specialty drug companies to develop medications for ultra-rare diseases. She received her bachelor's degree in physiology from Michigan State University and her master's degree in liberal studies from Wesleyan University. Her debut novel, Little Lovely Things, was released to critical acclaim by Source Books, Landmark, in April 2019. And here's what Judge Grady Chambers had to say about Moren's work. There was much that I admired in these poems and think the writer shows great potential. The poems often focus on scenes from the speaker's childhood in a home with a, quote, battered mother and loveless father, and evoke memory with images of surprising tenderness. The speaker recalls, quote, the crooked part in his sister's braids, how she hid self-inflicted damage, quote, her hands curled like claws around her pencil. The poems are brief of that world, and the images often carry the poem's emotions. The lucite blue eyes of a broken Madonna become the eyes of the speaker's mother. The speaker remembers the huge rhinestones glued to the sunglasses his mother wore to hide a blackened eye. Congratulations and welcome, Moren.
Thank you so much. The first thing I want to just say before I read is what an honor it is to be with these remarkable poets. And if you see me looking down, it's because I'm taking notes, because it's just amazing. And then I want to shamelessly plug my novel if I can. It's available wherever books are sold, and it's my debut, so appreciate any support from that area. Thank you so much. The first poem I'm going to read is called Great Blue Heron at Core Creek. I belong to a dragon boat team, and we did practice prior to COVID once a week on a pond or lake nearby, not too far from Bucks County Community College. And we encountered a stately and territorial great blue heron on many occasions. One time we got very close to it in our boat, and it just kind of clicked in my mind, and I just saw this as a poem. So this is what I'm going to read. Great blue heron at Core Creek. He appeared in the shallows of Core Creek, in the molasses-colored water, under the cover of a tree, a monster bird, almost 4 feet tall. Slim as an exclamation point, his look designed for battle, steely blue breast feathers a shield, scythe-like beak the perfect weapon. Yellow ringed eyes deciphered the world with a low burning fire. Caught in the sweep of his warrior gaze, time became ice, my life stolen. Seeing him felt like a conspiracy, a buried treasure momentarily unearthed. Retracting his neck in preparation for flight, he lifted as if gravity had no meaning. Massive wings spread like a visitor from myth. How can this be unastonishing? Stroking into the sky, I lost him against the hazy blue, his very shape melting as if he never were. My second poem knows no intro. I just don't have any introduction for it. It's just kind of a poem of feeling and atmosphere, and it's a little bit spooky in a way. It's called Drought Season. I'm scanning the sky for a wisp of hope out the attic window. Behind me, congregations of dust motes swirl iridescent in a golden wedge of light. Damp Brillo scratchings on a pan downstairs sift into the attic like the serenade of mate-hungry cicadas in late summer. Wind shift, I catch a line of dark clouds crawling over the monk-brown horizon, casting vespers of moisture, faint, soothing, a cocoon of daydreams in a sleepless night. That's it. Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you so much for those beautiful poems, Maureen. Melinda Rizzo is our next reader. Melinda loves language. A freelance reporter since 1998 and lifelong poet, words hold surprise, revelation, and fascination. Her first book, Late Snow and Hellebore, is available from Aldrich Press, a Kelsey Books imprint. Always on the hunt for a good story in word counts or tercets, you can visit her website at melindarizzopoet.wixsite.com/mysit, one word, MYSIT. And here's Grady Chambers' comments on Melinda's work. There were some real moments of pathos in these poems, and I admired some of the descriptions quite a bit, like the quote, head then tail, turning of a bird at work in a birdhouse, and the speaker remembering the way their now deceased father used to hand them money from his wallet, quote, just because. I really liked the tone and language of these poems. There's an attentive, thoughtful, compassionate consciousness at work, and the descriptions are specific, evocative, clear, pleasurable in their honoring of the things of this world, whether those things be, quote, dinner plate dahlias the color of Jesus Christ's cloak, or, quote, Italian olive oil, fancy apricot jam, and floral paper napkins the speaker buys from a store. Welcome and congratulations, Melinda.
Thank you. Grace notes. Starlings fall like rain, pirouette, and dance around thin wire basket. Heckle one another over suet picked clean, barely a postage stamp. Nearly mid-February, winter has been mild. Grayscale days make me greedy for sunlight. The look of shadows cast long in late afternoon, first tender greenings in yielding soil. I'll refill the wire baskets, one each on opposite sides of the yard, both fixed within my sight, and songbird fruit and nut mix. The old farmer's almanac proffers recipes. I skip them. It's easier, and I'm more reliable buyer than maker of bird cakes. Valuable fats, proteins, sweetness after weeks without. And I don't mind the starlings, their boisterous gatherings like a family Thanksgiving with cantankerous relations. Those among the table spread, I see but once a year and wish from our shared history and fierce bonds, it was more. We all need to eat. The starlings fall like rain. They clean the peppered ground, make music with their cloistered wings. So one of the things that I am really inspired by is the natural world, and my observations often inform and become the genesis of my poetry. So the second poem I'm going to read for you is titled "Something Came in the Night and Ate My Artichoke Plant." It was set apart, something new to try. Nearest neighbor, an old lady lobelia clump, false indigo, given years ago by an old friend. Her dry pods like baby rattles. The milkweed nearby too, something I'd picked up driving home after church camp drop-off when Adam was about 14 and I had lost a job. I watered the artichoke plant every day. I was faithful. Its notched dusky leaves started moving slowly. After a few shovels of rich compost from the pile out back, it got moving. Kinnera, Scolimus, French globe artichoke, my newest experiment in hope. I found its remains in the early morning, watering the boisterous pumpkins and butternut squash, tangled and tumbling over one another, with the exuberance you find among a litter of weaned and thriving puppies. The infant globe, maybe a few weeks old, lay on its severed side, still green, still pliant, its raggedy cut hard evidence, a fat groundhog's greed. The darkening bee bomb's brilliant looks now faded glory, and the pollinators have moved on to cut and come again zinnias and a back choir row of overtall sunflowers. I had imagined bountiful harvests, simmering my abundance of French globe artichokes in lemon, wine, and water, serving them with homemade aioli. I nearly wept at the sight, still marked the spot. Artichokes are perennial, after all, and I, a wishful gardener, knows there is always next year, next season, next resurrection. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. And congratulations again, Melinda. So we're really fortunate now we get to hear from our 43rd Poet Laureate, the wonderful Mary Jo Lobello Jerome. Mary Jo has had a busy laureate year of Zooming readings and workshops. As Poet Laureate, her fundraising reading project for the Friends of the New Hope Library was put on hold due to the pandemic. So instead, she came up with a different focus, organizing and editing Poets in the Schools, an anthology of writing lessons by former Bucks County Poets Laureate. The book will be distributed free to high school teachers. So many poets from our family of laureates are contributing. Mary Jo has done such an incredible job with this, and I'm really excited to see its fruition. Mary Jo holds an MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts and has written for the New York Times, Scholastic Publications, and many other magazines. Formerly, she was a high school English teacher and associate professor of writing at regional colleges. Her work has been published in many magazines and has won a number of honors. A few of her recent poems are forthcoming in Poets Reading the News and the Patterson Literary Review. She is currently working on a collection of poems. Welcome, Mary Jo Lobello Jerome. And remember, once a poet laureate, always a poet laureate.
Very good, very good. Thank you, thank you. Thanks, Jenny, Maureen, and Melinda. Your poems are wonderful. And Liz, thank you for all your work and for your wonderful poems. Loved hearing them. And to Ethel, thanks for all your work. You keep this Poet Laureate program alive and vital, and you make it fun, which is fantastic. And I really appreciate the support for the Poets in the School project, the handbook that we're doing. And like Ethel said, so many of the Poets Laureates are contributing, and hopefully we'll get it out in early spring before the high school poetry competition. That would be really exciting. And I also have to thank Chris Bursk for being our inspiration and our mentor. He is always in my heart. So today I'm going to read a number of poems that really trace the journey I've been on this year, not as the Poet Laureate, but living through this weird, crazy, stupid year. I think a lot of you will be able to relate. The first poem was written prior to me even being the Poet Laureate, back at a time when we used to easily travel on airplanes. Do you remember those days? It was a while ago, but it is called Inflammatory Response. Singapore, then Austin in 1 week. Breathing, oh breathing was hard. No escaping the muggy tropical lush of dense fronds, the damp undernotes of spores and earth decay. The tangled jungle was close, though the hard-baked streets were wide and clean. Still, at the thronged, hot, wet market, I wheezed in the mist of puddles volatilized from melted ice and fish blood. Then a stop in Texas with its dry spring on the verge of drought. Cedar pollen dusted green the handrails, car hoods, window panes, every arid surface finely powdered and scorching. The scrabbly woods around the kid's house, thirsty and bleached pale. Back home, asthma aflame from the offending flora and feathery air, all those invisible, inhalable motes carried on deceptive breezes, treacherous birch, white pine, oak, and ash, a futile conflict. I'm armed only with meager weaponry, daily pills, sprays, inhalers, gaspy prayers. Palliative illusions, no cures, no true compromise. I try not to read the aggravating news. I learned that pollen grains are male. This body at war, swollen, mucousy trachea, its subconscious battle of cells, a country divisible, killing itself bit by bit in habitual squabbles. There are days panting that I wish for something big and biblical to cleanse the world, to trade everything for clarity and freshness, a flood of clear air, a shining do-over so we can breathe easy again, trust our one body. This next poem was written in the late spring, just as I was dying to get in the garden, in response to the killing of George Floyd. There's so much to say, and I found that I could only say a little bit. The season of ash. The smoke is rising. This is what I'll keep from the notes I have scribbled these last flaming days. No spring tender shoots, no mountain of mulch the truck dumped in the yard, nothing of the pots heavy with iris, catmint, bee balm planted where the devil's hair took over the wet, woody corner. Creations in the garden fade like ash in the hurt of now. And then on to the pandemic in the heat of summer. Kissing windows on a pandemic summer day. He flattens his lips on the plate window of the storefront. Inside, the mannequins wear face masks. He kisses the glass in a line like nibbling an ear of corn, greasy lip prints smudged through grime and soot. I'm at the corner in a crowd, aware of heat and distance, waiting for the light. We watch but avoid his eyes. Sir, sir, a girl calls. Don't do that. It's a fact. You'll fetch germs. Fetch, not catch. She's not from here. Someone needs to take him home. 94 degrees, no answer but sweat and shrugs. He rails to the still life models dressed in lime and pink spring outfits, a mini dress, a pantsuit, tan handbags, medical face coverings. Don't deny me, he yells. The system, where is it? Julia, pick up the phone. It's hard to hear exactly what he says, but who doesn't know how he feels? When he leans his forehead on his reflection, tete-a-tete, I imagine he whispers street corner secrets in the sun to the Julia he can't visit. What he needs, these mannequins overdressed for a day on the town can't give him. When the pedestrian signal lights up, the mom from elsewhere pulls her girl to the crosswalk. Someone will fetch the police. Later at home with the neat row of salvia and vinca out front in the shade, I tell this story and regret I made it funny. So I tell it again, the right way. And then on to October this year, when we were all deluged with election craziness. This poem is called Torch the Empty Fields. It's from Virgil's Georgics. Thanks to Chris for turning us on to this one. My friend, the writer, applied for a permit from the town for a bonfire to burn the wreckage of this year in effigy. She would use the broken limbs from the dead trees, cracked shutters that hid a pulsing colony of angry wasps, the rotted rescue ladder dangling over the steep riverbank. That's what she told the town. On the invitation, she wrote, "Let the flames burn the stubble away. Bring kindling." Amazon cartons, election junk mail, the neighbor's lawn signs, splinters of anger, your bruises. Let's make ashy feathers for our hopes. Wear your masks. I called to see if this was a real thing or a poem. She said, both. Sometimes her work is a wink and a nod. Sometimes it's urgent. I brought a thermos of hot bourbon toddies to help me through. The first thing she burned was the denial from the officials in the closed town hall. Whole tree trunks formed a pyramid pyre over shorter logs, planks, and abandoned junk from a collapsing shed. The arms and legs of seatless chairs, a shattered chest, missing drawers, skeletal picture frames, vague pieces of wood that once were something else, all flared and disintegrated in flame. In October's thin air, sparks leapt amber and wild. Dots of stars peeked through holes and thermals of smoke like embers. We dropped our blankets and coats in disheveled heaps, piles of bodies in the long shadows. The blaze pushed us back and back, widening our circle until no one could speak. The heat and energy explosive enough, I thought someone might strip naked and howl or combust. That's how ready we were. This next poem is really from my journey this past year, my journey for the past few years. It's a poem for my mother. I dream what my mother means to say. Here are the papers, important, ordered, wrapped in rubber bands according to year and account, and all the bills by outstanding and paid. But don't let that roofer fool you, that son of a bitch. God forgive me, I paid him in full. And here, the canceled checks for donations I made every month to the church and the Precious Society of the Sacred Heart for their beautiful mass cards that I keep in shoeboxes if you need one for a funeral now that everyone we know is dying. And the jewelry, remember, I've already divvied among you, my sweet girls and the boys' wives. No difference, even that one who left, I'll never forgive her. And whatever gold I didn't give away, I wear every day on a chain around my chicken skin neck because the rings slip from spindly fingers I don't recognize. And the heavy anniversary pendant bruises my breastbone. Remember, it's under my blouse in case an ambulance takes me alone and unconscious. You can't trust anyone. And Dad's medicines are here, even the old bottles with faded labels. Maybe they're still good. He was always sick with something. And if anyone needed a doctor, it was me, but did I complain? And the tax bills are here and the annuity account in my name alone. Remember how he fell for Atlantic City, those crooks? And the deed to the house, which I've already signed over to your sister because the rest of you had your chances at love and you blew it or not. She's still single. And do not tell me again it's her choice and she's happy. She gets the house. Don't argue with me now. I'm tired. Everything aches since we lost your brother, my first, the best of us. Mine alone for a year. How could he drown? He was so strong. I'll never understand. What my mother really said, pausing at the foot of her bed, out of breath. Look in the straw when I'm dead. And this last poem I'll read is a newer one. It's for my husband. Being locked in our houses, shut down in isolation, you notice a lot of things that you may have forgotten were in the house. It's an ekphrastic poem based on the painting by Caravaggio in 1605, San Girolamo writing at his desk. And San Girolamo is actually Saint Jerome. It's called The Masterpiece in Our Bedroom. San Girolamo in a dark room at a table is deep in work, partially draped by a rich red cloth, maybe a cloak, maybe the covers from his bed, as if he rushed naked to his desk straight from a dream with an idea that was humming in him all night. Intent, brow furrowed, head down, he squints at the parchment of a thick book. His balding head shines at one rounded spot, a reflection of the thoughts inside that blessed brain, whirling along, reeling with hunches. If this were a graphic today and not a Caravaggio, we'd see thunderbolts on that pate. He's a saint, we can tell, from the thin, illuminated edge of a halo, barely visible in the shadows. For most of the years, this framed postcard has decorated our bedroom dresser. All those times I dusted around it, I never noticed that little light. The focus is his arm reaching across the table. That's what gets me. Muscled, tanned, alive, only the wholly of a bare-shouldered body. Without lifting his eyes from the book, San Girolamo reaches, quill in hand, towards a dark inkwell near a memento mori that sits blank-faced on another open book. The man reads, the skull stares, tries to remind the living this world is fleeting, the dark and light of afterlife eternal. Those old Christians frightened so of heaven and hell kept the bones of some poor friend in their rooms as omen. But the skull here is half in shadow, dull, just a paperweight, unheeded. Listen, I imagine the master whispers to us from the bureau as we loll in bed. Allow yourselves scarlet bedclothes and strong bodies alive in a glowing room and work you want to dive into and books. Books are good, piles of them on a table to retreat to, partly naked after rolling around half the night with your love, vital, eating up this life and one another while you can. Thank you very much. And congratulations, Jane. I really look forward to your reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jo, for that gorgeous reading. Heartbreakingly beautiful. And thank you for all you're doing for the program. So before we hear from the 2020 44th Poet Laureate, Jane Edna Mohler, we're honored to have Senator Santorcero with us here today to present her with the state citation. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you, Dr. Recken. I appreciate that. Mary Jo, amazing work. Congratulations on your work. And Jane, congratulations. As Dr. Recken just said, I'm going to be presenting you with a citation. It's going to have to be virtual today, since we're not all together as we were a year ago. And hopefully we will be all together a year from now. But in the meantime, I think it's important, and I'm glad we're able to do this, if only by Zoom, because this is such an important achievement for you. It's an important recognition for our community, and especially now when we are so beset by, the pandemic and turmoil in our country. For us to stop and remember how important the arts are in our lives, and how poetry in particular lifts us up and lifts our spirits up, as we just heard from listening to the work of Mary Jo, in a way that helps us transcend, I think, some of the daily problems that we face. And as human beings, I hope elevates us ultimately to a better place, where we can really grow as individuals, and both inside and out. So I'm really grateful that you live here in our district, and am very excited to be able to be part of this recognition today, and hope in the not too distant future that I'll actually have an opportunity to get together with you in person. And perhaps if you have an opportunity to come out to Harrisburg, we would be very happy to have you recognized on the floor of the State Senate in a more formal ceremony in recognition of this achievement. So with that, I just want to congratulate you. And I too am looking forward to hearing some of your work. I have unfortunately a tight schedule today. I'm going to have to be signing off in just a few minutes, but I do want to hear some of your work today. And again, I want to congratulate you, and I want to thank the community college, Dr. Recken, and everyone who is involved in making this happen year after year, but particularly this year, given the challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
For the
Absolutely.
very meaningful words, and your presence is so meaningful to our program and to the college and to all of us here. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So now our 44th Bucks County Poet Laureate, Jane Edna Mohler. Jane is a native of Bucks County, currently residing in Peace Valley. Broken Umbrellas, her full-length book of poems, was published by Kelsey Books in 2019. Her poems are forthcoming or have appeared in Gargoyle, the Skinny Poetry Journal, the Boston Globe, the Schuylkill Valley Journal, US 1 Worksheets, River Heron Review, and the 2020 Bay to Ocean Anthology. She is the 2016 winner of Main Street Voices Poetry Competition, a two-time pushcart Prize nominee, a Robert Fraser finalist, and previously a runner-up for the Bucks County Poet Laureate competition. A presenter at the 2020 Beta Ocean Writers Conference in Maryland, she is scheduled again for 2021. Jane taught English over 2 summers at Guangdong University of Foreign Studies in China. She's a school counselor through the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. She shares her home with her artist husband and 3 distinguished cats. In addition to writing, Jane is a traditional rug hooker, gardener, and kayaker. And here's what Judge Grady Chambers had to say of Jane's work. The poems in this packet have a casualness of observation I admire, a kind and thoughtful consciousness behind them, and are full of clear, resonant images and nice sounds throughout the lines. That coupling of imagistic clarity and a consistent music through the lines is something I admired most in these poems. The language is at ease in itself, but never loses its music. As in the line, quote, "The stove roars and still the house is chilled," or in the writer's description of a medevac chopper's, quote, "flashing shadow passing across the dome of a museum," or their memory of a hill in winter that, quote, "crackled underfoot," and, quote, "stiff branches tinked like tin." The poems feature an aging speaker facing the world with wry humor. In Broken Umbrella, the speaker walks to an appointment with an acupuncturist and thinks, quote, "I ache. My chi has run into a ditch. I want it fixed. I want my umbrella to remain a little broken." The poems consistently exhibit careful, thoughtful observation with moments of real pathos, as when the speaker holds an, quote, "unchosen crop from the garden and thinks of it being, quote, "familiar as the face of a friend." Looking around at the unpicked vegetables, the speaker sees not common crops, but, quote, "an entire acre of vehemently enduring lives, whom I knew well." Welcome and congratulations, Jane.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm gonna check my screen. I want to thank Liz, Melinda, Jenny, and Mary Jo for your wonderful writing and your wonderful poems. I need to thank Ethel for running this program with all the style and verve that she puts into it. Of course, I have to thank Chris Bursk for being my mentor for all these many years, his encouragement, his skill, his heart, and the community he built here for over 40 years. Thank you for the Bucks County Poets Workshop members. You all mean a great deal to me. I want to thank you to our workshop members who are no longer with us, but made such a difference to me and so many of us. And that would be Pam, Herb, David, Sandy, and Jared. There were many before my time. Thank you to my former teachers, Jerry Fabian in Doylestown, and Martha Collins, who was at University of Massachusetts at Boston. Thank you to my husband for his support, and thank you to my son, James, for being my son. And thank you to all of you that are here. And every one of you owe me a hug in 2021, because this is a really hug-free year. I decided I was going to work mostly from the packet, because there were more than a few years that I applied for this honor, and I am really honored. So I'm going to read from the packet because there was a science to it, I understand. My first poem will be appearing in the 2021 issue of Gargoyle in DC, and it's called Miserere. The epigram is from Psalm 51. You desired that truth be in the hidden places, and in the concealed part, you teach me wisdom. His deep set eyes looked Russian. All I can say is those strong roots in his face made me stare. He was young, and interested in something I had said. I can't remember what. It was a dream, and I didn't need to ask. Now I worship on a floor with one mismatched tile. Swaying to psalms, I take note of the shoes around me. I want to take my fingers and pick at that tile until it gives. I want to take it home. The next poem is inspired the title of my book, shameless thing, Broken Umbrellas. And this is just one umbrella. Anyone reading, any of my friends with the book, it's on page 94. Broken umbrella. I'm walking in the rain with my broken umbrella. It makes me yearn for China, where umbrellas work so hard. In the road, there are 2 water main plates, 4 sprawling puddles, and I am thirsty. I'm walking to the acupuncturist. Even though he talks enough, he makes me think of my father. My father mostly healed himself with fish hooks, hose, pruning shears, and saws. I ache. My chi has run into a ditch. I want it fixed. I want my umbrella to remain a little broken. I want to think that China is waiting, hidden behind the brooding earth, where something a little broken is nothing to see. Ha. The museum that Grady referred to is the University of Pennsylvania Archaeology Museum. I had several open heart surgeries, the last one being at University of Pennsylvania. It left quite an impression on me, obviously. So the next 2 poems are from that time. They lay it back down. From my hospital bed, I see a straight line of geese flying under the power lines and over the river, which flows below, just out of sight. Across the street, only 2 pigeons fan over the red dome of the Archaeology Museum. Something deters the whole flock from sunning above the brick and ivy. The dome arches over treasures from ancient China, Egypt, and Ur. The medevac chopper casts a flashing shadow on it, landing hour after hour 2 floors above me. There, hundreds of anonymous skeletons and lonely skulls lie meek in drawers, while Tang's prized steeds retain their names and prance in relief on the tall, cool walls. There, one petite mummy reposes under glass at the perfect height for 10-year-olds to stare with fear or giggle at his wisps of ancient hair, wood brown teeth, nakedness. Here, I have counted 14 incursions into me, abdominal tubes, taps in my neck, my arms take the brunt of it. The extra tissue and blood I bequeath them is busily chopped, swirled, and stored. They take more each day, and I don't say a word. Needles in my belly fat, blood at midnight, careful notes about glasses of water taken and urine returned. All week, huge yellow machines dig next to the museum. A loader lifts and breaks the clods of old city dirt. Each night before they leave, they lay it back down and smooth it. I never quite understand why they did that, but I spent a lot of time looking out the window. This one's called Preserved. It's on page 20. Egg yolk yellow and slippery in syrup, preserved peaches in mason jars, cooled, then rested quietly on the white Formica countertop. Each hot August day, Mother tapped the tin lids with her short nails. I learned to listen for the metallic tone that meant the safety seal was tight. Now I listen to the ticking of my new heart valve, forged with graphite, titanium, and tungsten. There's no counting the thuds and clicks, a 3-shift factory now rooted in my chest. It's loudest in the night, urgent as a prisoner's rap on a pipe. It wakes me. This new, uncertain acquaintance who knocks way too late just to say hi. Many of you know I live by Peace Valley Park in Bucks County, and just like Melinda was saying, nature's all around and it's very influential. This one is called Circling. On a raw stump far back behind the house, we offered the quiet gray heart and curled purple neck of the Christmas turkey. In the hard cold, the hill crackled underfoot and stiff branches tinked like tin above the soft, blood-scented gift. Now, deep in January, dark Christmas lights swing idly from the bare stick bushes. The stove roars and still the house is chilled. Gathering wood from the far pile, convinced of certain suffering, we leave dog food and table scraps on the stump. In the crusted snow, we find trails of clawed tracks circling our home, closer each night. Our tabbies thread behind the curtains, their pupils wide, staring out into the patient dark. More nature in the neighborhood. I think I have 1 or 2 happy poems. I'm sorry. It's a very wintry packet that I sent in. This is called Spectators. Turkey buzzards patrol my neighborhood twice daily, like cops. Between their rounds, dozens of them were regular fans of the local Little League. Pensive, they studied the games, never yelled, behaved like bored old men with cheap tickets. Steps were taken. This steady watch was way too much for parents. Now these carrion crows haunt the roofline of the strip mall. 5 above the pet store, 6 over the burger joint, and a dozen sniffing deathly fumes from Susie's nail salon. Noting wobbly toddlers, they appraise how tender the puppies might be, consider the consequences of red meat, and the beauty of their next meal. This next one has an epigram. It's knowledge is no advantage. Epigram is from Carl Jung. This is another dream one. Knowledge is no advantage when it is a matter of one's own dreams. The sidewalk may have been in Hopewell, beside the monument for my ancestor. March snow topped the obelisks and spalled slabs with sullen dollops of cold. Then there was a garden, not ornamental cherry or carved boxwood, but common crops, heart-shaped green bean leaves, and large limas with furred pods thicker than leather belts. They too were covered in snow, but strong and oblivious to the clawing cold. Still growing on the vine, unchosen, waiting long into the disinterested winter. Why not picked? I held one in my palm. It was familiar as the face of a friend. Here, an entire acre of vehemently enduring lives, who I knew well. sometimes I think that I dream of all these things because I'm a counselor. I started this next poem when I first moved to my house, and conversations I had with my husband about the future. And then it sort of morphed into some details from a friend of mine who doesn't know about that. So the poem is based loosely on several of us, and it's called A Widow Weeds. A widow weeds beside the house that has become her husband. She's annoyed he hasn't shaved. She walks to the lake that has become her sister. They pour into each other. She tells the lake about termites that have eaten the backbone of her house, another husband in peril. She tells the lake about her son who comes to stack wood, then leaves and leaves again. She tells the lake that her retriever didn't walk today because his breaths become too hard. She waits for the cool lake to tell her about geese who shatter the mirrored sky and its own tiresome filling and emptying. I haven't been keeping up on my page numbers. This is on 103. And I like that he talked about my casual language because I just think everyday life is the most exciting thing, really. And at one point, a lot of my poems were coming out of the kitchen. So this is called Sometimes Poems Spray from Onions. Sometimes poems spray from the bleeding purple onions I chop for dinner. Sometimes they wriggle between my dirty socks and towels as I sort black from green. Arrogant young poems loll in the sun, care less if we ever hear them, sloppy and delicious in their salty skins. Some poems are gathered beneath dry leaves, morels to beg from dense, cold clay. Poems may fall unnoticed, the last snow flurry, shaken loose from the empty cereal box of winter. Smoldering poems drift in the punk scent of the Bradford pear, springing as births from autumn's rut. And tonight, I hear thick-coated poems, lightly crunching on bones in the woods. Back to the winter. This was a really kind of silly one I wrote, but combustible. Silly but serious. Sticks felled by a storm, dry by the stove. The electric bill, dusty valentines, and a big lighter eye up the pithy wood. They talk big about getting together, something good, really nasty and mean, to bring down the whole damn house. Batteries in the trash bin brush their cold lips as they nestle in a crisp paper bag. Do their weak poles have it in them? We're all caught in the sharp crust of months-old snow. Matchbooks on the mantle glance at each other and a bottle of scotch on the table. Gassed up, the generator plots in the garage with the car. Imagine running wide open, busting the door and heading to the city, a red desert, far from this shallow breathing. Even I have baking soda in my sock drawer, and above that, white vinegar. I'm one laundry day short of my own volcano. A watch in the closet is quietly ticking. I really don't like winter. I just have a couple more poems that were not in the packet because This next one, as Ethel said in my introduction, I belong to a traditional rug hooking guild, and traditionally you use old wool clothing and such to recycle and to strip to make rugs. And then a lot of people do dyeing, and then some people use old silk ties to dye with the patterns of the ties. It's really beautiful. So I was getting ready to do this, and this poem came to me. Bringing in the sheaves. At the Mennonite thrift shop, I'm harvesting old silk ties for a project. Elbow deep, I feel around in mounds of musty flannel shirts, pilled novelty tees, and quilted barn vests. Ties always settle to the bottom in groups, like snakes, snarled under matted straw. Christian soft rock plays overhead, while the chaff of Sunday dinners sheds into the air. In its lining, a bland gray tie hides a pert pink, full-length photo of an open-mouthed blonde pinup. I put it back, giving it the chance to cause another stir. We shall come rejoicing. See, there was one funny one. In the pandemic, I wrote a few poems. One of them has all these foreign words that I can't pronounce. I can write them, but I can't pronounce them. So I'm keeping with this one, which will be in the next Schuylkill Valley Journal. And it speaks to the calm I felt with domesticity during the pandemic, especially since my dishwasher broke. So I actually found it to be really soothing. So the poem is called Day Keeping. The apron lifts over my head and ties behind my back. My hands know where to go. It's part of me now. Warm water, blue sponge. I bathe each slippery dish, spoons, cups, watch the suds slide off with the rinse. Stacking has its sense by heft, size, and fit in the rack. No different than the slip of a book into a crowded shelf. Wine glasses and a crystal vase I dry with a soft linen cloth. I shine them, rest them in a high, silent place. Last, the counter, stroked as a smooth cat. This prayer, a keeping of uncertain days, no more repetitive than the sun. And people that know me know I have a whole series of what has been called love poems to my son. He spends most of his life in Asia. So this is for James in Korea, and this will be my last poem, strategically placed. Every Tuesday morning. Every Tuesday morning, I drive a simple road beside certain mute fields. In October, waves of dry corn tassels soaked up the pink sunrise and glowed thick as sable brushes. But now the fields are cropped, shabby with November. Warm mornings, a sturdy herd of Angus head out early. They meet me with their silent black gaze. When morning is cold and stiff, they are far off on the horizon, just leaving the barn in a blue train of steaming muzzles, contemplating a ritual of grass. I send photos to you each week, and I'm certain you enlarge each one on your phone to closely examine that distant clan under the ever-changing sky. The sky is always changing. You know, I hope this unnamed herd matters to you too. That here, there is something we both look for every Tuesday. Thank you.
Wow. What a fantastic, fantastic reading, Jane.
Thank you.
You blew us away. I don't know if you got to see some of the comments in the chat and get to see that later on the YouTube site as well, but there was a lot of excitement happening on the sidelines throughout your reading. And I think just a lot of joy and excitement for you in what's to come in the year and years to follow within the program. So
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate everybody that came, and what an odd thing to be the first virtual
yes,
Laureate.
quite weird. And you and Mary Jo can share some stories. For Mary Jo, she was able to do this in person, but then shortly after, right, things changed. So yes, we'll make it up to you. We will be, I'm determined to have you read in our physical location as soon as we get back. And it will be great to all be together again, as the senator said, next year, hopefully. So thank you all for your beautiful readings. And thank you for joining us, Liz, and for your judging. And again, to all of you who tuned in who will be tuning in, since this is also going to be available in recording. So it will be accessible on the Bucks YouTube channel. And wonderful, wonderful day to be here with you all, and hope that you stay happy, well, and continue to be inspired and to share your beautiful poetry with us. Thanks again.
Thank you.